Welcome back for the second part of One Man's Faith tonight. We're looking at, I guess if I'm going to give this a title, whose sandbox is it anyway, okay? Looking at the land of Israel. Is it really Israel's? And what is all this contention? Well, I think I've shown you, and we looked at this last week, biblically it is Israel's. That land is Israel's. And God said, I'm even going to bring them back. You see, after David and Solomon, the next king was Rehoboam, and Rehoboam's logic was everybody's in subjection to me, and therefore I am going to push harder than my dad did against them, okay? Well, in doing that, 10 tribes separated. 10 tribes. What is then the nation of Israel was 10 tribes. They were in the north area of the land that was given to Israel by God. And they came under a new king called Rehoboam, who used to serve Solomon, okay? Unfortunately, he and every king after him, and I think there was 19 kings total, all did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, all right? Because of that, they were dispersed, like taking some of this poof dirt that we have and putting your hand and just throwing it up in the air and it'll just go everywhere, okay? That's what happened to the nation of Israel, the 10 tribes. They were dispersed. What's interesting, though, is they kept their identity. In almost any other case, the people that were overtaken by another nation would assimilate into it and become just like those that they are with. The people of Israel didn't do that. They retained their identity of being Jewish people. They retained, even when they were dispersed, a lot of them kept their Jewishness, so to speak. The other two tribes were called Judah. This is where Jerusalem was set in the nation of Judah. Okay? Half of their kings did what was right in the sight of the Lord. And so when the time came, they were all taken captive and deported to Babylon. But they stayed as a nation, so to speak. They stayed as the same people. They held their feasts or did whatever they could together and maintain their identity. 70 years later, they came back through, I believe, the decree of Darius. They came back. They were allowed to rebuild the temple, rebuild the wall, rebuild Jerusalem, and settle back in the land that they were deported from. And that who is there, and they populate and they start to move up into the northern area, that is who is there when Jesus comes on the picture. Okay? Now, after Jesus' death, about 60 years later or so, there were a certain mixture of people that wanted to rebel against the Roman rule. They didn't like not having their own king and having Caesar as king, and Israel was then dispersed, okay? But they kept their identity. Wherever they went, they kept their identity. Until in about 1897 or 8, somewhere in that time frame, people that were called Zionists started to say, hey, we would like to have a place back, our place back. And at the time, it was part of the Ottoman Empire, and just after World War I, Britain was in charge of it, and Britain made what is called the Palestinian Mandate. And in that mandate, it said that 2 states would be set up. 2 states, a Palestinian state and a Jewish state. The Palestinian state would have been larger than the area they were going to give Israel. But the Palestinians rejected it. And the Israelis started to move back in. And there was already set in motion kind of a war where the Palestinians said, we're going to push Israel into the sea. Give us 2 weeks. We're going to push Israel into the sea. And that's kind of what we see here in Psalm 83. They said they were making shrewd plans against your people, God, to conspire together against your treasured ones. They have said, come, let us wipe them out as a nation, that the name of Israel is remembered no more. That the name of Israel is remembered no more. And that's exactly what the Palestinians want right now. They don't want just to have their own state and land. They want to kind of surround Israel to such a point that they can get closer and closer to bombing them. That's why they won't land in the West Bank. And even more of a state even in Gaza, because that's where they're dropping those missiles. And their real hope is to totally eradicate. They don't want to live in peace with Israel. They want to eradicate Israel. The same thing that's been happening over and over. Hitler was trying to eradicate the Jewish people. There were others. The Muslims during or just before the Crusade were trying to eradicate the Jewish people. We as Christians came against Israel, and when Rome, just kind of dispersed them, all the Jewish materials a lot of them were taken and burned. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with a Jew or with God, the God of Israel, or anything Jewish. And so a lot of manuscripts and everything were just totally gotten rid of. Luckily, they'd already started to write the law and even some of the New Testament manuscripts in Greek. And that's the only thing that saved them. As a matter of fact, I think if we could ever find the materials, but I think most of it is burned up, we would find that over 90% of the Word of God was written in Hebrew, including the New Testament. Because except for Luke, every one of the writers was Jewish. And their main dominant language was Hebrew, including Revelation. It's very possible that most of these books were all written in Hebrew. And so we've lost a lot of that because they're the ones that killed Jesus, so therefore we don't want anything to do with them, and we don't want them to rise up in any fashion. And so we, even as Christians, tried to get rid of the Jewish nation and of the Jewish works and things like that. It's a spirit of the Antichrist, the spirit of Satan that wants to wipe out Israel. If he can wipe out Israel, then I think he thinks he can stay in some control longer. If he could totally wipe them out, then God would have nothing, at least in Satan's mind. But God has said, I will not allow that to happen. As a matter of fact, I think we looked at this in Ezekiel 37. Ezekiel 37, Ezekiel was told to take 2 sticks. I thought it was 37. Maybe it's 38 or 39. Let me just see here real quick. he was to take a stick and write on it the name of Judah. And then he was to take a second stick and write on it the name of Israel. I gotta switch over here to my last week's notes to find this. Here it is. Yeah, it's Ezekiel 37. Yeah, Ezekiel 37. 20. Ezekiel 37:16. And you, son of man, take for yourself one stick and write on it for Judah and for the sons of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim. Then join them together in one hand and one stick. And when it goes on and says, when people ask you, what are you doing? You say, I'm making them one. And in verse 22, and I will make them one nation in the land, in the mountains of Israel. One king will be their king, and they will no longer be two nations. So we're talking about that separation, and they will no longer be divided into two kingdoms. And I will make a covenant of peace with them, and they will be an everlasting covenant, and I will set my sanctuary in their midst forever. All right, this is what God said. Listen, you're not getting rid of these people. You are not getting rid of these people. These are my people. These are the apple of my eye. I delight in them. I am going to live among them. If you look at Revelation, the last 21, 22, Jerusalem comes down out of heaven and settles in Israel. God is not going to leave. For whatever reason he chose, he has picked that place, that sandbox to live in. And we are going to be living there during the millennium and possibly after that. So, yes, we need to be for Israel and not against it, okay? Get that cup of coffee and come on back. I got a little bit more to talk to you about, okay? I'll be right back.